Well, we live in an evil culture. I don't think that's going to catch anybody off guard. But it's nothing new to live in an evil culture. The Bible is full of stories of people who were living in a culture that things were just not going well. But the good news is that that's actually what we were called to do. We were called to shine like stars. And the darker the night, the brighter that we shine. So it's not a time to be hopeless, it's a time to be hopeful, knowing that we have so much opportunity to share the gospel, so much opportunity to be the gospel. And really the idea here is, we were looking at how we have to change. Well, one of the big things we have to change is how we think about the days we live in. We're not thinking about them in a pessimistic way. We're not, and all hope is gone. I'm just sitting here waiting until the rapture. No. We were called for such a time as this. And then the other thing we kind of have to change is we have to change how we interact with an evil culture. And we're going to look at this in a little bit, but it really seems like as Christians we go to one or two extremes. We either, shut ourselves off from the world and don't talk to the world, or we shoot off our mouth and just kind of talk foolishly to the world. And it seems like it's very easy to get kind of disdainful and, what's the word? Where you just despise people in the world. It's very easy to do. They do a bunch of things that you're really not on board with. I think the Bible's really not on board with it. And it's very easy to get very upset in your heart and just let yourself be bothered. And last week we looked at Noah, who preached and condemned without ever opening his mouth. Amazing thing. And so today we're going to kind of continue that by looking at Sodom and Gomorrah. And the main idea I want you to get from this is that we have to learn how to serve others even when it's hard. So let's look at Genesis chapter 18. And this happens right after the story I read at the beginning of the service. We'll actually start in verse 1 and just kind of move forward from there. The Lord appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. Then the Lord said, "The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah," this is in verse 20, "the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense, and their sin is extremely serious. I will go down to see if what they have done justifies the cry that has come up to me. If not, I will find out." So here we have a completely wicked city. It's gone down in history as a very wicked place. And they're so wicked that people who don't even live there are crying out against it, saying this place is terrible. And God, obviously is going to, quote unquote, look to see if it is as they're saying. So we hop over to verse 23. Abraham stepped forward and said, "Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" And then 32. Then he said, "Let my Lord not be angry, and I will speak one more time. Suppose 10 are found there, 10 righteous people found there." God answered, "I will not destroy it on account of 10. If I find but 10 righteous people, I will not destroy it." So what we have here is a city that is completely off the rails. This is before there were really countries. There were more like city-states. So Sodom and Gomorrah were more or less sovereign entities. And in that sovereign entity, there wasn't a whole lot of rule following. Everybody just kind of did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. We find out later that Sodom and Gomorrah did have, or actually earlier, I believe, that they did have kings, but the king really only ruled over the city itself. So God makes a comment that he's going to go and see. This kind of seems to imply that God didn't know, but it's really not like that. See, God did know, but he was giving an opportunity. I'm going to give them an opportunity to prove themselves righteous or wicked. And that's kind of just the way he says it. And the idea here is that the choice can't really exist in a vacuum. If God never gave them the choice to do the right thing, he couldn't really say one way or another if they did the right thing or not. So he's saying, I'm going to go and see. I'm going to go give them an opportunity to do the right thing or the wrong thing. Let's just see what happens. And so then we go on to verse 1 of chapter 19. It says this: "The two angels entered Sodom in the evening as Lot was sitting in Sodom's gateway. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them." So Lot is Abraham's nephew, and he has moved away from Abraham because they were kind of having conflict, just too much, and the land couldn't sustain both of them. So Lot goes and moves by Sodom and Gomorrah, and Abraham is down over in the hills, or I guess up over in the hills. When Lot saw them, he got up to meet them. He bowed with his face to the ground and said, "My lords, turn aside to your servant's house, wash your feet, and spend the night. Then you can get up early and go on your way." "No," they said, "we would rather spend the night in the square." But he urged them so strongly that they followed him and went into the house. He prepared a feast and baked unleavened bread for them, and they ate. So we're gonna stop right there, and let's kind of just give some clarity to a few things. To wash someone's feet in the old days, everybody wore sandals. They didn't have the shoes that we do. So it was more of a sign of being welcoming. That kind of ideas with it. As far as the gateway, you might have noticed when they walked into the city, Lot was sitting in the gateway. The gateway in older cities was kind of like a central market. If you had business to conduct, it would be in there. If you wanted to have a case addressed, sometimes the leaders would be sitting there. It was more of a place of general meeting, almost like a town hall, except it's in the open air. So it's more like a gathering place. Next up, it shows that Lot got up and bowed down to them. This is just more of the ancient culture than it is anything. It's basically just a way of showing, I come in peace. We have aliens here, we understand this. I come in peace. And, just more or less an idea of showing somebody respect. Back then, they had a strong sense of showing respect to outsiders and people who you didn't know. And I think there's actually an Asian quote, if I remember correctly, something about treat an enemy with respect because you never know when he's an enemy or not. And then the next thing here that's kind of foreign to our culture is that Lot goes to great lengths to show these two hospitality. Now, nowadays we have hotels and that kind of stuff. We get hotel rewards and all that. So it doesn't really mean the same thing to us. But to them, there weren't hotels just everywhere. You're kind of just, well, I guess I'm going to sleep here on the ground. And hospitality was a really big thing in the culture. They had an honor-shame kind of thing that went on. So with that, the things you did kind of reflected on you and your entire family and household. It was very important to the way you treated people. And when you took somebody in as a guest, more or less you were taking them in as a friend or almost like a family. It was one of those things where you were treating them with respect. There were certain rules that they followed by custom, and there were certain rules that you followed by custom. So it was custom for you to be welcomed in, somebody wash your feet, for you to be provided for with a place to sleep, that kind of stuff. And with that being said, as a guest, you wouldn't take advantage of that. You would show respect and honor to the master of the house. These things aren't so common nowadays. Nowadays, people just kind of do whatever they want. But it says here that they wanted to stay in the courtyard. That they said here in verse, I want to say it was verse 2, he says, "My lords, turn aside to your servant's house." And then they respond to him and they say, no, we'd rather spend the night in the square. The question being, why? Why would you want to spend the night in a square rather than going and staying at somebody's house? And there's really three reasons that I'll mention. The first is because they were there to test the city, not to be in comfort. They wanted to see if there's going to be anything that happened. So as a guest to the city, how are these people going to treat me? What's going to happen? So there's the first thing. They were testing the city. The second thing is because in this kind of the ancient Near East, there's kind of this whole manner thing. You wouldn't say, hey, you've got a car, and I've got this money. Can I borrow your car? That's how we do things now. How they did things then is there's kind of this negotiation thing, kind of like we're going to finagle a little bit. So you see Abraham in another story. He's trying to buy this plot of land, and they go back and forth about the price. That's how that culture was. So when Lot's asking them into the house, it's custom for you to say, "Oh no, I don't want to put you out." You know you're going to go. They know you're going to go. But it's kind of a back and forth thing. However, it does seem like it's going a little bit more long and a little bit more awkward than it's supposed to go, just because it says about how he pressed so hard. He urged them so strongly. It seems like there might have been a third thing going on too, and that's to test Lot. Is he really wanting to be a servant here, or is he only going to be a servant so long as it's easy? And so I think that for those three reasons is what's happening here. So he urged them so strongly that they followed him and went into his house. In verse 3, he prepared a feast and baked unleavened bread for them, and they ate. Now, it says specifically unleavened bread. Don't read too much into that. The idea here is that unleavened bread was something you could make very quickly. Remember, the law hadn't been given to Moses yet. It's not talking about any kind of anything there. It's just he had to hurry up and make something. And if you wait for the yeast to rise, that sometimes takes a long time, sometimes all night. Well, you don't want to keep a guest waiting that long. So that's really the idea there. So now we can go on to verse 4 and beyond and see how this progresses. We've got these two angels. Abraham tells them before they go, please don't destroy the righteous with the wicked. And they meet with Lot. Lot persuades him to stay with him. Let's push on from there. Before they went to bed, the men of the city of Sodom, both young and old, the whole population, surrounded the house. They called out to Lot and said, where are the men who came to you tonight? Send them out to us so we can know them. Now, there are children present, so I switched some of the words to things that aren't so X-rated, okay? We all know what it means by knowing someone, right? If you don't, go read the Bible in your own Bible, and you'll know what I'm saying. So Lot went out to them at the entrance and shut the door behind him. He said, don't do this evil, my brothers. Look, I've got 2 daughters who haven't been intimate with a man. So now things are getting kind of dark. I'll bring them out to you, and you can do whatever you want to them. Boy, this does not sound good. This is the worst dad of the year award, right? However, don't do anything to these men because they have come under the protection of my roof. Get out of the way, they said, adding, this one came here as an alien. But, oh, look, they've got aliens too. But he's acting like a judge. Now we'll do more harm to you than to them. They put pressure on Lot and came up to break down the door, but the angels reached out, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door. They struck the men who were at the entrance of the house, both young and old, with blindness so that they were unable to find the entrance. So keep in mind here, we have dramatic irony going on here. Abraham said, hey, don't destroy on account of just 10 righteous people. And so here we have, in response to that, a whole bunch of unrighteous people storming the house to abuse these 2 guests. So Lot went out to his future sons-in-law. He said, get out of this place, for the Lord is about to destroy the city. But they thought he was joking. So let's stop right there and kind of recoup here. It says here that the men of the city, both young and old, this is a way that ancient writers wrote to imply a large majority, not necessarily to imply every single man in the entire city and its surrounding. Okay. Nowadays we think in more literal terms. So if they say every single man, we think every single man. But in the ancient world, they'd say every single man to say a large majority of the people. We know this because Lot's son-in-law evidently wasn't even there. He was over at a party, and I can assume that there's going to be other people there at the party with Lot's son or future son-in-law. But you see that the tone of the people of the city is very mocking. When Lot tries to tell his future son-in-law, they just think he's joking. They're laughing about it. God's wrath is a thing that's like, ha 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 ha. He's not really gonna come. It's fine. None of that's really gonna happen. And the idea here is that not one single person intervened to stop this evil thing from happening. Not one single person, well, except for Lot. But I mean, of the city, not one single person did anything. And you have to wonder, so the point can be made, but hold on. This was before the law of Moses was given, so surely they just didn't know. Well, no. No, that's more or less not a very good point to make, because yes, the law of Moses had not been given, and by and large there were not laws against homosexuality at this time. However, we can just appeal to conscience and know objectively it is wrong to rape somebody. It's wrong to do violence against somebody else if they don't let you have your way. We can know objectively that these things, and this is the exact same thing. The author of Genesis isn't appealing to a certain law. There wasn't necessarily a law in the ancient Near East to forbid homosexuality. That's not what he's even talking about. He's specifically talking about the way that these people are obviously depraved in their mind. It's not something that he has to point to a single law and say, well, they broke this law. There's a law that transcends human law. And that's really what the author of Genesis is pointing to. And even if it was okay to treat people like that, you also have the law of being hospitable. Now, it's once again not a big deal now, it does. But back then, this man has welcomed these people into his house, under his roof. He's under their protection. He's a special honored guest. He has a place of honor. And to go to somebody else's house and mess with their guests, it's a big no-no in the ancient world. And yet these people have no clue. They're just like, whatever, we can do whatever we want. So there's There's just a lot of things going on here, obvious sins. And so then that takes us to the idea that the host is responsible for the safety of the guest. Now this takes us to two ideas that we can come to. There's two different views, and I'm going to give my opinion at the end, but there's two views to understand the whole incident with the daughters. They come to abuse these two guests, and so Lot says, hey, I have two daughters, take them and do whatever you want. First off, this is not instructive in the Bible, okay? The Bible oftentimes records things without saying go and do likewise. And that's exactly what's happening here. He's not saying, hey, Lot should have thrown his daughters under the bus. It's just recording that he did do this. So there's two views to understand. The first is, I would say there's probably about a 50 to 70% of people who take this view, and that's that Lot simply abandoned his daughters. He just abandoned them. They're on their own, and this would obviously be a sign of how far Lot had been corrupted by living in Sodom and Gomorrah, that he was okay with sacrificing his own daughters, obviously for a quote-unquote good cause of trying to be honorable and stick to his vows and protect somebody, but still, like as a father, I can't even imagine doing this. I can't even imagine thinking this. Doesn't seem like something that would even enter my mind. But the argument could be made that he was willing to sacrifice something that was extremely precious to him for the sake of upholding honor and trying to be righteous. In that case, it would be more of one of those things where Lot was trying to do the right thing. He just didn't. Unfortunately, though, the Bible doesn't really describe the tone a lot of the times. It doesn't say, he said this sarcastically, or he said this. No, we just have the bare basics recorded. So then there's a second view, and this is the view that I personally take. It's that Lot was appealing to their conscience. And I have three reasons why I believe this is the right view. First off, his daughters, as a part of his household, were also under his care. So yes, he took in a guest, and it was his job to keep the two guests safe, but his daughters were also a part of that safety. They were a part of that structure. So it just doesn't really seem something like in there. In this way, you could kind of paraphrase. Let's say the IRS gives you a huge bill, and you say, hey, why don't you take my jacket as well? That would be maybe a good a good example of what he might be saying here. Hey, yeah, why don't you take my daughters? You know, in more of almost like a sarcastic way. And the idea here in appealing to somebody's conscience is you're basically saying, hey, you wouldn't do that to one of your own, let alone a guest, right? You wouldn't do that. We've lived here. We're a part of you. We are one of you. And you can see them kind of reference this when they say, this man came in among us. He's still an outsider. So it seems likely that could be a thing. And another thing is if you go to the next slide there, Grace, I've kind of highlighted a few sections of the verses that I want to point out. The first is that it says that he shut the door behind him. He came out and shut the door behind him. So first off, he put himself in the place of danger instead of hiding behind the door. Second off, he didn't bring anybody else out with him. He just shut the door behind him. That kind of seems like he had no intention of bringing the daughters out. If I was going to bring somebody out, I don't think I'd shut the door behind me. And then the third thing is, here he says, 2 daughters, they have come under the protection of my roof. He's acting like a judge. He says this to them. And remember, he never once said, you are all a bunch of, whatever. He said, don't do this great evil, brothers. He's appealing to them to do something, right? And their response is, he's acting like a judge. This man's judging us. Who are you to judge me? Which, that's nothing new either. We kind of hear that all the time, don't we? But anyways, and in their defense, their reply to Lot, they never once even mention the daughters. They say, you're judging me. Okay? So now we're going to do even worse to you. And they don't even bring up the daughter. That tells me that they didn't really take the offer serious one way or another, whether Lot actually meant it or whether he didn't mean it. And so here's the thing about evil. And we live in evil days. We understand this. Evil always demands more compromise. It does. It doesn't matter how far you move back, there'll always be another step, right? Before it was, hey, it's okay, let's put these in our movies. And okay, all right, Well, now it's, okay, now we're going to put this in our movies. Well, okay, we got to push the line back further still, and we got to include this group of people who are doing something very morally questionable. And now we have to accept this. And now we have to push the line back even further, where if I disagree with it, I am being hateful and condemning. See, it keeps getting pushed back and pushed back. I was like, well, so you either hold the line and get called, you're judging me, or you keep backing down and let evil reign. And that's exactly what's happening here in Sodom and Gomorrah. Lot could have just let it go and backed down. Yeah, you're right. Who am I to judge you? I'm not God. It's just between you and God. Yeah, here, take these men. But that would be caving to evil. And evil always demands more compromise. It always pushes us further. It takes us farther than we want to go, keeps us longer than we want to stay. That's how evil works. It's working right now in our culture. We see it all around us. And the thing is if you say anything against it, evil hates those who disagree with it. It hates it. How dare you stand for something? You have to stand for nothing unless I tell you to stand for it. Once again, we see this in our culture all the time. This is nothing new. It's been happening, as you can see here, for thousands and thousands of years. And it's something that we have to deal with in our culture. So either way, regardless of whether Lot was throwing his daughters under the bus or whether he was saying it more in a way of trying to appeal to their conscience, regardless of whichever way he meant it, the angels intervened and we don't actually see the fruit of that. We don't see it, what happened. I do have to wonder what it must have been like for the daughters. Oh, Dad will take care of it. Wait, what? What did he say? Did he say what I thought he said? Google searching, what do you do if your dad is going to hand you over? So, either way, the angels intervened. We don't actually get to see how it progresses because presumably they had seen all they needed to see. Nobody was going to offer them hospitality except for Lot. Nobody was going to defend them except for Lot. Nobody was going to do all these things except for Lot. So I was like, well, I guess that's all we need to see. The test is hereby ended. And as you can see from their response, it doesn't seem like they were going to take the daughters anyway. Regardless of whether Lot was serious or appealing to their conscience, they weren't even interested in the daughters. They never mention them. They don't go after them. They go for Lot, and they go for the two guys. That's it. So maybe that's kind of the point. I mean, think of nowadays. Think of, different people living in various sins. When they are hell-bent on their sin, can you really persuade them over? You know what I mean? No, they probably, from a moral and sexual point of view, they probably weren't even interested in that anyways. So, let's progress on from there. I'm trying to be purposely vague for younger ears. So, Lot did try, regardless of whether he was right or wrong and how he tried. He was trying to do the right thing. And it started to go very poorly because, I mean, once again, we don't really think about this, but imagine all of Roswell is outside of your door, or at least a grand majority of them, okay? That's a very intimidating thing. And yet Lot put himself out the door and shut the door behind him. He's obviously taking a stand here. So, he was trying to do the right thing regardless of that, and it was going very poorly. This could have ended very poorly for Lot. I mean, not good things could have happened. And the funny thing is about this is that he wasn't even preaching at them. He was just trying to appeal to them to leave his guests alone. That was it. Like, we don't have a single account of Lot going out and, bothering the Sodomites or Gomorrites, trying to, you guys are all living in sin. No, he just, you guys do your thing, but please don't mess with my guests. He's being peaceful about it. He's being calm about it. Well, I guess wisdom is the only thing you have left when there's a large group of people outside your house. But either way, he's trying to do the right thing, and then they still take it poorly. Sin forces a conflict. It does. Because it says, no, you have to cave to me. And if you don't cave to sin, it's going to come back and try to get back at you. It's just, that's what sin does. But Lot's trying to serve these people. He's trying to do the right thing. And there is a difference, I will say this, there is a difference between trying to share the gospel with somebody and just trying to criticize every single thing that they're doing, letting them know that they're going to hell. Yes, sinners go to hell. Sinners sin because they're sinners. That's what they do. Yes, absolutely all those things. We aren't called to go out and point out every single sin that a sinner is doing. We're called to serve. We're called to share the gospel, right? We're telling people about Jesus. Because here's the thing. People are going to come to this church still practicing the sin that they're doing. God came for the sick, not the healthy. My dad told me a story once that said when he first got saved, it was quite a story. This is why I'm such a big believer in Teen Challenge. I'll just tell you the short version of it. I don't want to keep you guys here all day. The idea is this. He overdosed, and he was dying, and Jesus appeared to him in his room. And did a miracle, and my dad survived. He went to Teen Challenge. And he got saved. He really changed his life around. But he didn't get saved in Teen Challenge. He got saved back at that overdose. And he still did drugs for a while. He still did stuff for a while. He was living with a girl that was married to somebody. He was living with this girl. And he goes to church, and his friend says, "You're living with that girl?" He says, "Yeah, what about it?" "Well, she's married." He said, "So?" "Well, that's wrong." He said, "Really?" See, we're talking about depraved, sinful, evil culture, right? Evil doesn't know those things. What they need is they don't need to become a Republican or, become a good person or get off of drugs. They need Jesus. That's what we need. We need Jesus. It's what Sodom and Gomorrah needed. It's what our culture needs. Evil needs Jesus. Jesus is the one who breaks the chains. And when you come to people with the gospel, it's a lot different than coming to them saying about how they're sinners. Yeah, they're sinners. They sin. You know what I mean? There's a certain element of wisdom that comes that should be present in our evangelistic efforts. St. Peter has this to say about Lot, and I'm just going to pick up in the middle of the sentence because it's a small part of a whole paragraph. Read through St. Peter and you'll see the larger context. But he says this, "He rescued righteous Lot, distressed by the depraved behavior of the immoral. For as that righteous man," talking about Lot, "lived among them day by day, his righteous soul was tormented by the lawless deeds as he saw and heard." In our culture, there's this big push to just blindly accept and tolerate and all these different things. Don't speak out against anything. Don't stand for anything. And obviously I'm condoning standing for something wisely, but we do still need to stand for something, right? And St. Peter shows us this. It shows us that evil should bother us. We shouldn't be okay with the things that are happening in our culture right now. We should be bothered by it. That's where it should be. However, in that, it is important to remember that we are judging sin. Look in your life, look in your heart. What is the sin in me? Right? We are taking a stand for what is righteous. But we are not hating the sinner. Does that make sense? We're going to have to come in contact with people that right now we despise. These people are everything that's wrong with America today. Those are the people that need Jesus. Those are the people Jesus is sending us to. Are we willing to learn how to love those that we despise so we can be a voice, or are we going to see the sin and stop there? Because here's the thing, okay? If you're going to stop at sin, you need to stop it yourself too, because we all have sin within us. The Bible says anybody who says, "I have no sin," is a liar. They're a liar. I'm a sinner, you're a sinner, we're all sinners. The only difference is that we have come in contact with grace, and they still need to. So evil should bother us. The problem is, I've noticed in our culture, and I'm sure you've noticed the same thing, is that nowadays people are defined by their sin. They define themselves by their sin. I'm this. See, it's no longer a thing that I do, it's a part of who I am. I was born this way. This is who I am. So now that you have people defining themselves by their sin, anytime you talk about the sin, it's an attack. You are attacking me. You should validate me. Isn't Christ about loving people? Isn't he about serving people? And now you have this whole long dilemma. That is the world we live in today to witness and evangelize to. That's it. That's where they're starting from. There's no respect for the Bible, no respect for parents, no respect for anything like that. We have to start at a different starting point than witnessing to people was 20 years ago. It's a whole different world out there. And here's the thing with Lot. It wasn't one thing. Oh, Sodom is evil because he did this one thing. No. The culture was evil. They were doing a bunch of wrong things. It wasn't this one thing. And I think modern day Christianity, we do this. We focus on one thing that's going on in our culture. It's like a hot topic for us, like transgenders or something. And we say, okay, this is that one thing. Here, hold on. Even if somebody's not transgender, there's a lot of sin in our culture. It's not one thing. We live in an evil culture. It's all throughout it. It's not just this group or that group. We're all a bunch of sinners, and we need a move of God. But the thing about Lot is, even though he was living in an evil culture, he was looking for an opportunity to serve. He was just looking for an opportunity to serve. And if you look at Hebrews 13:2, this is what it says. Don't neglect to show hospitality, for by doing this, some have welcomed angels as guests without knowing it. And it's talking about Lot. And so here we have Lot, who was inconvenienced by this, but he was still out waiting for the opportunity to do good. He was in the gateway, waiting for the opportunity. The angels come, he won't take no for an answer. No, things aren't going to go good for you if you stay out here. And singing off, I need to take care of you. You don't have anywhere to stay. So these are two things. So what can we take away from this? And I think there's two specific things that are worth mentioning. First off, don't let the culture get in you and steal your servant heart. Okay? We live in evil days. It's extremely difficult nowadays to continue loving. Let's look at what Jesus said about this. And remember, Jesus knew this was going to happen, okay? So here we are in an evil culture just like Jesus was in. And this is what he says. Because lawlessness will multiply, the love of many will grow cold. Whose love will grow cold? Ours. We live in an evil culture. We're going to get tired of dealing with it. And our love will grow cold towards each other and towards the world. They're just a bunch of sinners. Let them go to hell. You don't know how many Christians I've talked to and they said, well, good riddance. Well, Jesus kind of cares, so I guess I probably should too. And here's the thing. We live in lawless times. We live in evil times. So the love of many will grow cold. That's a warning for us. We don't want our love to grow cold. Because out there, they're not going to act with love. Back in the day, you could say, hey, don't look at pornography because it was wrong. Nowadays, people say, it's not wrong. You have to start from a whole different starting point. You can't appeal to a common reference that, no, something's wrong. They just say, no, it's not. I've talked to many a drug addict who said this, drugs aren't wrong. I'm not hurting anybody. I'm just hurting myself. And there's nothing wrong with hurting myself. Does the Bible ever say, thou shalt not hurt yourself? And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't say those exact same words, just like it doesn't say the exact words, hey, don't smoke meth. Like, there's some things that the Bible doesn't say word for word, but the idea is there. And, it's a different world that we're encountering. We're talking to people who have no background in the church. The church of tomorrow isn't going to be raised with their parents were Christian. The church of tomorrow is going to be a bunch of people who have no background in going to church. Unless we just attract people who've been going to church their whole life and nobody gets saved. We can do that too. But I think we're called to seek and to save the lost. So it's easy to serve if everything is great. But it's hard if your days are evil. For Lot, for instance, it cost him his home. This is where he was building his life in Sodom. And it got destroyed. God literally burned the whole thing with fire. So I'm pretty sure his collector's edition Star Wars is probably burned by now. And, he almost lost his health, too. By putting himself outside the door, these people were going to manhandle him. Things were not going to go well for this guy. But he was trying to do the right thing. And so then you get to the second thing that I think we can really take away from this. Be a servant. God himself came to us as a servant. God told us to be a servant. He recognizes Lot as somebody who was, bothered and trying to be hospitable. So I think this tells us obviously that we need to, in an evil culture, be a servant. When everybody out there is serving themselves, serve others instead. Because there's the thing, they keep doubling down. I'm going to do what I want for me all the time, but I don't feel peace. I don't feel good about it. Well, yeah, because serving yourself is not going to make you feel good. So be hospitable and generous. Be loving and reaching out. It's not about, hey, you have to stand firm. You have to yell and rant. It's about, what did we see in Noah last week? Obey God and wait in silence. That's step one. Okay, we're not stopping here. This is the beginning of the series. Okay, so should we say nothing? Well, we're going to look at that next week. Okay, obey God in silence like Noah did. He never once said a single word, and yet he's called a preacher who condemned the world. That's quite a statement. And then this week we looked at Lot. Serve like Lot, where it's inconvenient to you. Everybody around you is doing the right thing, and wrong thing, and you're still doing the right thing. And because here's the thing, light is made for the dark, and you are the light of the world. You were made for the dark. God created you with the intent of being a light in the dark. Lord, I pray that you would soften our hearts. Help us to love as you loved. Help us to serve as you served. Past what we get back from it. Even if we get slandered or hated in the community, help us to love the community with our whole heart, soul, strength, and mind, Lord. That we would follow you and follow your example. That as Christ died for the people that he loved, that we would also die to self for the community that we live in and we live. Lord, that you would work through us and do mighty things. Lord, we don't want to just be contentious or ornery or troublemakers. We want to show the grace that you gave us, the light that you gave us. We want to be, as the Holy Spirit says, have the fruit of gentleness and kindness. That our words would be sweetened like a honey. Lord, I pray that we would be an example of Christ to people who don't know about Christ. I pray that we'd always remain dedicated to truth, not compromising, never compromising, but steadfast against evil. Give us courage and wisdom in these last days, that we would know how to properly handle things, how to properly deal with people, how to properly serve, how to properly tell people about Jesus and witness and evangelize. Help move us, God, that we would move from where we are to things that we haven't done before. And we love you, Lord. Amen.